Welcome into the Pop Culture Piledriver. I am Jason Rossi, found on the Twitter machine and over at the Instagram at Jason D. Rossi. And with me, as always, is my tag team partner in the podcast sphere. He goes by Billy D2411 on Twitter. It's Billy D. Billy D, what's going on?
Hello. Not too much. I gotta say, I don't remember the last time I watched our topic of the day here. It's been a long time. 10 years. It definitely hasn't been 10 years. I watched it more recently than that. But the Lost finale...
We'll have a lot to talk about because we'll get into it, but let's just start. The topic today, we're not going to get into any other news, nothing else. 10 years have passed since Lost finale, quote, The End, episode titled The End, aired on May 23rd, 2010. Feels like a lifetime ago, Bill, but the episode, according to IMDb, is described as Locke searches for Desmond to achieve his goal of destroying the island. Jack, the newly appointed protector of the island, sets to stop him. In Los Angeles, the survivors slowly reunite to recall their island experiences. This on IMDb, Bill,
is wrong.
Well, that's the description. And it gets an 8.2 out of 10 from the IMDb crowd. Little background news and notes on it. We can get into the critics on this one, but it was also have here somewhere the ratings on this one. It only scored like about 13, like a 13.8, I believe, which was nowhere near probably where Lost or ABC thought it would be.
You mean million viewers?
Yes, 13. So the premiere, just to put in perspective, I'll get the exact number in a moment. The premiere had about, I think it was like 12 or right around 13 million when season 6 premiered. So it just kind of shows that this episode didn't grab the larger audience I think they were expecting, and it also came on a Sunday night when Lost at this time was normally on Wednesday nights. So I think that might have also kind of played into the ratings a little bit.
Get my beer on, get my Lost on, in case of the Wednesdays.
Are you drinking a DHARMA Initiative beer?
No, that was a Office reference for those Office people out there. Of course, you have not watched it, so
still never seen it.
TGI Wednesdays, am I right?
I'll say yes. I'll take this joke and say, oh yes, Bill, I remember that. That's a hoot. But okay, I have the official ratings here as it loads. But yeah, so season 6 of Lost obviously kind of comes under a lot of scrutiny, and I guess like what we're doing here is retrospect. But yeah, so Lost, the End, which was 2 episodes in one. If you watch on Hulu now, they have the uncut version. So I guess the Jewish version. It's a 13.5 rating. So it was I believe the highest of that season, but the premiere, to put in perspective, the premiere did a 12.09. So not really a big jump from that. So I think that might have been, something that may have kind of...
It was somewhat of an event, but I mean,
absolutely.
End of 4, 5, and beginning of 6 kind of, I think, turned a lot of people off because it was a lot to take in. There was a lot of stuff that was going on with the flash forwards, the flashbacks, and then the famous flash sideways in season 6, and spoiler alert, they weren't dead the whole time.
All right, I'm glad you said that to start, but we'll get there.
But I mean, it was just one of those things that kind of pissed me off the way they did the storytelling. And I watched back The End last night real late, and I rewatched it again today, and then I started watching from the beginning of season 6, and I just hated the storytelling of season 6. So I could see why a lot of people were just like, fuck this. It was just like, it was getting me like aggravated watching the show. Just because of the way they did the flash sideways, and you're like, what is this? Is this... It turned out, well, I mean, spoiler, right? It turned out to be their purgatory, and that's where they're all meeting up. But it was just, I don't know, I hated that narrative they went down because I think they were forced to go there because they extended the show because they only planned it to be like a 3-season show.
Yeah, so I watched the finale 3 times since Saturday. I didn't watch any other episodes because I was just really focused on this, and which will be, we'll get deeper into details on this specific episode. But the one thing that I did watch was a Damon Lindelof interview when the movie Prometheus came out. He was discussing with a journalist, but this journalist basically took the whole interview about Lost in the finale. And, he basically explained a lot about it and said that there was time, and a lot of creators, I give them credit for when they come out. He said there was a lot of time in season 3 that they were stalling because they didn't know they know what they wanted the end to be. They just didn't know when the end was going to come. And not just the end, the show title, but the end of the show. So he said there was some episodes like the world famous worst episode, I think maybe in television history.
Nikki and Paolo?
No. I like that episode. At least that's
That
funny.
wasn't bad, yeah.
The episode of Stranger in a Strange Land, it's all about Jack's tattoos.
Oh yeah, that was famously it's gonna reveal so much, and they came out and said, a lot of the writers too, that you would get these promos building where it was, hey, all the answers revealed tonight on Lost, and then you walked out of it and it was like, oh, he just got the tattoos in Phuket. Cool. Yeah. Wow.
Bai Ling. She's cool. No, and I think that's something I want to get into in a moment too, about why I think the show has such a device ending or device like divisive, that too has a device, but no, it honestly has so many people that are split down the middle. I guess we'll just start with this. So it aired on May 23rd. I'll never forget. It was a Sunday night, again, not their usual. It was supposed to be a 90-minute episode. The ABC granted the creators it was just about 2 hours. I think it actually did overtime run on live television, because I think now if you watch the uncut version, it's like an hour and 43 minutes. So call that an hour and 30 something minutes. I think that ran over.
It's 104 minutes total.
Okay, so either way, so they put the mat together with commercials in there as well. Highly expensive commercials, by the way, because that was another thing that came from the show. They did say that they charge not Super Bowl prices, but big prices for the finale. So with that being said, I remember that day because I used to, when I worked in radio in a different life, it was a day after our famous yearly concert, which was called Earthfest. This is 16-hour days promoting. I used to promote concerts, host. It was crazy stuff, and it was a lot of work. And I remember that being the next day, and I was like, I'm going to be so burnt out, and I was very emotional to start for the day. Watching that episode, the one thing that I remember about it was there is so much emotion. There's a ton of emotion when you watch this episode. Regardless, we'll get into our thoughts and like how we really feel about it. But I remember once it was complete, once it ended, I was so satisfied. I was like, this is great. I was so happy. I was like, this really was a nice cherry on top. That if you watch it on its own, yeah, it doesn't make a ton of sense because clearly there's 6 seasons of background, but you can watch just like the storyline progression, the character development, and the situations the characters are put in. But that is the one thing I think anybody who watches this could take away. It was a beautifully done episode. I just think the hype behind the mysteries, behind like all this mythology behind the show wasn't completely tied up in a bow all the time. There was a lot of answers given throughout the series, but I think people were expecting like some sort of big, punctuation to a couple of the mysteries that we didn't get. But aside from that, I just thought the episode itself was beautiful. I remember being super emotional at the time. And then I'll let you speak about it, because then I'll talk about kind of, I think, what happened over the next 2 to 3 years after 2010. And I think where we are now.
I fucking hated it. I hated it at the time. I don't really like it. No, I didn't really like it at the time. I didn't really like it going into it. Mac brings up a good point that a lot of people said it was purgatory around season 2. The thing that I think we need to hammer home here is none of this was purgatory until the end. So the purgatory was the Flash sideways. The actual purgatory thing that like people pitch, I think that's where they were going. Like that was their meeting place. Everything that happened on the island, and it meant something. I thought season 6 was just so convoluted. There was so much homework you had to do. There was so much like thinking and like critically thinking, like way too much to put into a TV product where you have to literally go and like look at a YouTube video and kind of understand exactly how everything happened, who was where with when, with like the whole thing was in that purgatory. They kind of just showed up whenever they died. Like Hurley could have been alive for fucking 500 years. And then they all get there and they walk into heaven or wherever it's supposed to be together. But the thing that like made me so pissed off about this final is the whole thing, everything that mattered was that storyline at the end. They were all brought there. Like Jack was number 8 or number 12. Like everything did mean something. Like you did have a lot of meaningful moments, but it was just so washed away in that purgatory crap, which I don't even think if you could like boil it down maybe into a little lesser piece, I don't even know if you needed it to tell the story.
See, I agree with you.
It was just so aggravating every time to be like, what is like, this is just bullshit. And it took me probably 5 or 6 episodes to figure out that it wasn't even like a real thing.
Yeah, I think the problem with it, especially from my perspective of this, was it didn't have to be all season of that Flash Sideways. That could have been a nice pivot point. There was 18 episodes or 17 episodes, but 2 of them were 2 hours. So let's just call it 16, 15 episodes. That could have kicked in somewhere in like episode 10, because it really, the problem I think retrospectively is that for 15 of those episodes, that Flash Sideways didn't mean anything. It really didn't. It just showed like, why was Jack and Juliet married? Why did they have a son? And why wasn't that son Aaron? I know that sounds weird, but like, why wouldn't you at least tie some of those other loose ends in, or just put these characters in this jumbled mess? It just, that was the part that's really hard to describe. And when you watch it back and realize like there was no reason for Jack and Juliet to be in this flash sideways, or this, whatever you want to call this afterlife pending period. There was no need for those relationships when it was all leading to them getting their remembrance moments, which that was the best part of the finale.
That was the best part by far of the finale. That did give you the heartstring.
Oh man,
that gave you the chills at certain points. But I cried everything, and I really didn't tear up. I cried at an episode of Dave recently. Like, I was like emotional, and this one really didn't do it. It gave me, I think the finale gets panned as a really bad finale, but it's not a really bad finale. It was done okay. It wrapped up enough for me, but I just hated the way they went about it. It really made me fucking viscerally angry, because I invested so much time into the show, and season 6, I could see why people fell off. Like, I committed, like, we would watch each episode that night, rewatch it, and then rewatch it before, sometimes 4 or 5 times before the next episode was even on. And it was just too much work to be like, I don't want that much work to go into my television where I'm having to critically break it. Like, I don't mind having like theories and stuff like that, but this was just like, I don't know, like, it was too confusing. It wasn't like they're giving you a mystery and then it'll eventually come back around. It's like, at the end, people were like, what was that flash sideways? It was fucking weird.
Yeah. Well, I agree and disagree. I think the one thing I want to cut to this now, I guess, is that I think the biggest problem with the fans and people like myself, even like I said, I loved it when it first aired. The next 2 to 3 years, I got really pissed because I felt like we were let down. We were left astray. There were so many mysteries, so many little questions. I was like, why is there an answer to this? Why is there an answer to that? And I think the biggest problem was, we talked about it, ABC as a network was advertising the answers. No time for questions is over. The answers come this week. And it was the episode where they had the history of Jacob and his brother, which we never found out his real name, or Philip or something. But like, that episode really didn't answer a lot of the questions we were looking for. It was actually unveiling new questions, like, why was there a cork on the island? What was the point of this good versus evil battle? And Jacob just kind of made up his own rules that you could have just broke as soon as somebody else was the leader. Like, it was just strange, but I think that was the point. There was fan theories all over the place. Fans, like, this show really did revolutionize television, and I stand by that. There was no shows before this that people like got together on the internet. This is pre-Twitter. Facebook was around, but it was a college website. This was before, people were, message boards, Reddits. This was just ABC's message board.
I mean, it revolutionized TV without a doubt. They did a great job of the DHARMA initiative, all the lost experience stuff. But again, everything about the last season just felt a little bit off. It felt even like, I think the Jacob and the Man in Black came in season 5. Right.
Technically, Jacob.
And season 4.
We saw him in season 5 when Ben killed him, and then season 6 is when we saw him in the Man in Black in the beginning of the season.
Yeah, but he's going around like finding people and shit in some of them, right?
Yeah, that was throughout season. Yeah, yes.
So I mean, even like the cat, like he didn't look like him in the Man in Black. I was like, these guys they don't look like they should look for literally the God and the devil, because that's what we're dealing with here. It's black, white. They set it up with the game of backgammon. They knew where they were going with that stuff. And the purgatory stuff, it just was so convoluted and complex that it didn't mesh with the other stories. And the flashing moments were fine. I don't think you needed to do the whole Jack married to Juliet, like you said, and Sawyer's a fucking cop. That makes literally no sense.
I don't mind. See, I think Sawyer being a cop at least makes sense in this realm, that in this other world, like, he was a bad boy. He was like anti, establishment. And so in this other world, he's like a cop. He's just that. Okay, I get.
Jack's the fucking same though.
But
Kate's a criminal.
But that's the point I don't understand. So then Jack in this other world is a doctor. He's married to Julia. Like, some things just didn't make sense. And I think, like we were talking about, it just didn't need to be a full season of that.
See, that's the stuff that aggravates me. The little mysteries that aren't answered. I expect that. If you've not to stroke my English degree, and I can't spell, but whenever you go into some sort of media like that, print media, video, whatever, movies, you're not going to get every question answered, and you have to be okay with that. I don't care where the foot statue came from. I don't really care about the origin of Jacob or the island, for that matter. I want my stories to be concise and told properly. I want the ending to make sense, and to me, for the most part, it didn't make sense. And even the Wikipedia thing or the IMDb thing you read, they said that Locke was looking for Jack. No, that was not Locke.
No, he's looking for Desmond.
Desmond. Yeah, he's not. That's not Locke. That is not even close to Locke. He is a completely different person. He's just in the body of that actor.
Great line.
It's so convoluted in the way like they went about it that IMDb, which is the fucking the Bible of this shit, doesn't even get it right in their synopsis.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I did, compliments and criticisms can be handed out. Locke died. Ben killed him when they went back. When he was Jeremy Bentham, and they went. The Lost Six, the Oceanic Six, came back. So they creatively came up with a way to keep Terry O'Quinn, who is an excellent actor, and was incredible on this show, to keep him involved. I just think it was a little hard at moments, and I thought that was such a great line by Jack in the finale when they're lowering Desmond down to the core of the island, and he's like, you may look like him, but you're not him, and you're a discredit. It's a discredit for you to wearing his face, and I love that line. And also the correlation there with the hatch when Locke and Jack are looking down as Desmond's being lowered. Desmond, I think, just a key contributor to the whole show. One other really difficult part when you look at the show and unanswered and really confusing is Desmond the whole time once they detonated the atomic bomb there to set off the incident that set off this whole flash sideways allegedly. Desmond knew about the flash sideways in current time. Like he knew.
Like he's a time traveler. That's another thing.
Yeah, but he knew about something he knew his constant stuff where his mental state was going from past to future. That okay, but that was the only thing that I think was really confusing, because how did he have awareness that he had so confident when he was going down to that core of the island. He's like, oh, that's fine. I'm gonna go down there. I'm gonna uncork this. I'm gonna go where I can be with the loved ones and be happy the rest of my life. And he's like, Jack, you're there too. And it's like, okay. Then he does it and he realizes, well, that ain't happening. It's just a weird, pivot points. And those were little things that I think were frustrating, even though at the end, these guys all did meet up in this, whatever you want to call it. Because it's religious, but not religious, because in that scene where they get into the church.
Oh, it's 100%. They're in a church. It's God and the devil. They're in purgatory. They had to literally cleanse themselves to be welcomed. And then Ben couldn't be welcomed because he didn't fully cleanse himself. I mean, this is like, it's the problem when you do these kind of complex stories. You can do a complex story if you're good at wrapping it up. They didn't do a good enough job to a mass audience to explain it. You literally have to go to a YouTube video, in my opinion, to understand how the timeline works and makes sense. That should not have to be your homework when you take in a television show. It should be a little bit. It was fun, but these aren't even the Lost explanations. This isn't the Lost experience. This is legit some guy that I watched today because I was like, I forget how this all played out exactly. And I had to be like, the whiteboard, oh, yeah. No, that thing sucked. That aggravated the fuck out of me. That guy sucked. That was 600,000 views.
And it's so obvious, too. He's like, well, if this is happening in this timeline, and this is happening in this timeline, there's a ripple effect here. It's like, all right, bro, listen, it's not that difficult, but good for you getting hits. I'm going to make that video.
Oh my God, it'd be so much better. But there was a guy who did a 14-minute video who broke down exactly how it works. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yes, that makes sense. I understand it now. What they did on the island mattered. They did flash forward. They did flash back. The flash sideways was just purgatory for a way for them to meet up and then go to wherever they were going. But you shouldn't have to do that much work to understand a piece of television. You just shouldn't.
Yeah, I think the biggest point of the whole show was the show named Lost. It wasn't about the plane being lost, these characters being lost away from home. It was their mental, who they were. They were lost as people. Every single person, every character on that show was miserable, sad, and a mental state of lost. Jack with his drinking problems, his marriage, his father, even Hurley, who you think is the happy-go-lucky guy, right? Well, he was having all these issues since he won the lottery. His mother broke her ankle. The house was burning down.
He killed a bunch of people.
Yeah, he did. I forgot. Yeah, he's a murderer. No, not literally, but he was
inadvertently.
Exactly. So he had all these issues. He was miserable. Every single character. So I think the one thing that kind of ties it all back that, to go with your storytelling was they all, at the end, if you think about it, they started off in this plane crash, all lost characters, to then at the end, all find each other again, to then finally move on and be done with it and be able to live their afterlife or whatever you believe happens when those doors open. So that's a one piece of storytelling. I think that the creators knew from day one where they wanted to go. Also, the wonderful ending scene. Show opens with Jack opening his eye. The show ending with Jack closing his eye. And when Vincent, come on, Bill, tell me there wasn't tears when Vincent just comes prowling through.
Not really. I was disconnected from this final. I remember watching it live. I remember the experience of it and just being like, huh, okay, cool. Like, I get the whole, like, you pretty much, map out a point in time of, like, your most important experience. And that's what this was. Like, their time on the island, they wanted to preserve that. That was the best time for them, living with the people on the island. And that's what wound up being their, I guess we can call it heaven. Mm-hmm. And that's where they met up in purgatory. And then when they were all together, they finally decided to go off. Like, if you have, I just watched Dave, like, if you have camp friends you were really fond of, or, our friend group is really, good together. I get that, like, solid story point. Like, I like that. Like, this you shared a unique experience with these people, and you're not going to move on to the afterlife until you're all finally together. Like, till you've all, like, cleansed yourself. And that, I think that was one of, like, the things that gets lost in this. But, like,
everything fits.
It's a little too convoluted for me to have one of the greatest TV shows ever end for, like, and I'm not saying, like, you don't even, like, I don't even think you're stupid if you don't understand it. It's fucking complex. Like, you literally have to, like, break it down.
Well, it is and it isn't. I think there's two sides to how complex it. Like, I think you're also trying to make it more complex, where it could just be like, if you just watched it, it is a beautiful story. It is beautiful to see these people, and you get. In it, but, like, you get to see all these characters and them being back together and finally moving past. I always just laugh. The one thing I just always think is funny is how Christian Shepherd is, like, the, like, big, like, lasting moment, but he's only part of Jack's life. Like, nobody else, like, realistically.
A little bit of Claire.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah, good point. But, like, that doesn't, like, correlate at the end. There's no. It's just kind of like, he's funny. He walks down, taps Jack. He's like, all right, let's open up this bitch and see what happens. I don't know. I just think, if you want to dislike this, it's very, very easy. But I still believe the reason most people are unhappy with it is because of more of the hype of the network and the fan base than actually the show itself. I don't think the show itself was driving us to answer every little nook and cranny. There are so many mysteries. And there was this one guy, it was about a year ago, that I watched 6 hours worth of, like, why Lost sucked. It was like one of those YouTube videos. And I watched season after season, and how he's like, the producers lied, they did this. And then listening to Damon Lindelof in a 20-minute interview basically said everything you need to know. We had multiple writers on this show. There was a writer strike during the show. He wasn't using it as an excuse. It was just, these are facts.
Sounds like an excuse.
But the point that he was trying to make was they delayed what they were trying to do at different points. They had to force in things when they really weren't looking to do that.
No, I mean, that happens now with all these shows. Once they get successful, they want to pick them up for as long as they can.
Like The Walking Dead.
Oh my God. It's literally at this point Walking Dead. It is fucking terrible. I stopped when they barbecued the dude, the painted meat. I was like, I'm out. It's the same thing every time. They show up, there's a villain there, they gotta leave. It's just rinse and fucking repeat. But this one, to me, again, I can't hammer it home enough. You didn't have to make it so, like, it is a simpler story if you kind of boil down that flash sideways to something that's more palatable for an audience, because you're wondering what the whole time. All right, you already flashed back, you already flashed forward. Where is this in my timeline? And apparently, it's not even there. And they weren't lying about the purgatory thing. Like, they really were alive. Everything they did on the island mattered. But you kind of just wipe that away when you do the flash sideways. And the way it opens, yeah, I mean, it's just, I like to remember the good times. You may not like the way something ended, but be happy for what was there beforehand. And I can't love seasons 1, 2, and 3 anymore. It's legitimately perfect fucking TV. But once they start really throwing in stuff just to kind of lengthen it, you can see where the holes come in.
Yeah, I just, the thing, I agreed with a lot of stuff you say. Like, I agree. Like, again, this is hard to argue. There are so many ways. I still think it was a really, really well done finale. I think it's one of the better finales for a show like this. Like, think about, like, the shows that are realmed in sci-fi, the Fireflies, the Twin Peaks, the shows that have this underlying, like, this has the most core emotional nice touch point at the end. I think that they did it well. I think it was smart. I just think it is tough because they based the whole season. Like, when the season opened, that LAX opening scene where you see Jack on the plane, Desmond's on the plane with him, the plane lands, they do this weird, lost, the die is under the water. I said to myself, I go, oh crap, Desmond did something, or when that bomb went off, it never happened. The plane never went on. Like they're fine. So that I think was the tough part because the narrative. I think they wanted you guessing on what the heck this side Flashways was. But at the end of the day, we really, for 50% of each episode to take place in the Flash Sideways was the hardest pill to swallow. Because then at the end, when you find out, when you're gathering, like I still remember watching it thinking, they had to go somewhere. Desmond's like, we're going to go somewhere. And Kate's like, where? Why'd you get me all dressed up? Why are we going to this concert? I'm thinking they're going back to the island. That was in my head. I'm like, they're going to find a way to make this island. Maybe it's going to be like an eternal loop. I just thought they were going to have something like that. And instead they're going to a church to move on, which was fine. I actually liked that part, but it's just the way we got there was just so like, why did I watch all this? And like that random Asian, like Togar, the Asian guy that was in the temple, who was also part of the Flash Sideways too. It's like, what was he doing there? He wasn't a big part. Like the whole thing was like, you built this place, you built this area because this was the most important time of your life. If you all needed this, but then they had like random side characters in episode 2 in the Flash Sideways. Like, no, you didn't need that guy.
Sydney, the plane lady.
At least she was involved on the island. We saw her a couple times. The kids we saw. Oh, by the way, where the F was Walt?
Yeah, no Walt, no Michael, right?
Michael was, he might have been involved in one. He wasn't there at the end. Walt wasn't there at the end. Dr. Echo, or Mr. Echo, Doctor. Mr. Echo wasn't because he wanted more money, which is still one of the best stories. Like,
Libby was there for a quick second.
Yeah, Libby, meh. Anna Lucia was in one of the episodes, but not in the finale.
So, I mean, that's another thing. It's kind of, it was hard rewatching this knowing, like, that Desmond's kind of a jerk and Jack's kind of a jerk. Yeah.
He like a jerk.
He got in like real life, his character, like not his character, his like real life human person. Like,
why is he a jerk?
I think he did some bad stuff on a set. Same thing with Jack. Not
really?
Yeah, but
that's one of the best characters of all time.
That might be slanderous, brother. I mean, I'll see you in a little life, brother. I've said that my whole life. Well,
it's one of the best lines
since that. But it's just one of those. I don't know. It is. I think going to go down. And like people do pan it as bad. I think it gets overwhelmingly bad, but it is going to go down as one of the worst finales of all time because I think it was like the first one with really big stakes. And I think Breaking Bad's blows it out of the water. I didn't absolutely love Breaking Bad's final season, but their finale was, I mean, I don't need everything wrapped up in a tight bow and things were left up in the air. Jesse driving away. I didn't need that movie. That movie was terrible.
Nobody needed that movie.
Nobody needed that movie. But I mean, we can him and haw over, whether they did a good job, whether we liked it or not. But I did like certain elements of the finale quite a bit. Like there like I'm watching it behind me right now. It's on. Mm-hmm. I mean, there were some great moments, some things you finally wanted to get to see, and you saw them. Like when Jack went after the Man in Black and finally killed him, kicked him off. Dude, that was a great moment. Even though he did like a Superman the
Superman punch. It goes to commercial break. Him like this, then they're gabbing. He's like in a DDT. Yep. That doesn't correlate, but no, I think like the fact that Lockie, that's what they were calling him, Smoking Lock, that he stabs Jack, which eventually is the death nail to him while Jack, when the court comes out, all the rules are out for, these two characters. And I really liked also Lockie telling Jack, aren't you kind of the obvious choice? He's like,
yeah, that was good. But he wasn't the actual choice. He just needed to be the guy to do it so Hurley could be the guy.
I thought that was perfect.
It was good. That was a good line. And like you said, I mean, Locke kills it every time he's on screen. He's probably one of my favorite. Like if I had to pick a favorite actor from a drama, like a best character actor in a drama, it would be him for me a little bit over Walter White because he absolutely murders every scene he's in because he's a little bit more reserved. His character isn't over the top as much as many other people's. You feel for him. I mean, the scene when you find out that he's just like a regular dude in an office job, like in a wheelchair, it's just like each reveal gets a little bit more in that episode. And that's what I loved about this show, that it made sense. You earned it throughout the episode and then it finally paid off. Whereas like the final season on a whole didn't follow that format. It just didn't feel like the same show and the same way of storytelling. Like when Saeed snaps that dude's neck, I think at the finale of season 3, I literally jumped out of my chair and fist bumped. Like, fuck yeah, that was awesome.
The end of season 3 is incredible. One of the best.
It was that to me, like that should have been the end of the fucking show. Like just call it right there.
No, I remember.
It would have went down as the best TV show in history. It really would have.
We talked about this a lot at that time. If the show ended after season 3, if they were to tighten up some of the stuff, but that scene where Jack screams, "We have to go back," I'll never forget that whole summer being heartbroken. Just knowing like, oh my God, they got off the island, because we didn't know at that point. They got off the island and all Jack wants is to get back. He's broken. He's a broken man. Kate seemed happy. The only 2 characters we actually saw that were off island. And I'm just like, and we knew there was somebody that was dead, but I'm just like, I remember that whole time just being like, this is insane. Actually, at the time, and I think, were you there for when me in a prior, again, another life, when kind of the origins way back to a podcast, like OG podcast stuff, TV guy, were you there when we filmed that thing at my old work?
I don't think so.
It's somewhere on YouTube. If you look up like Lost season 3, whatever, me and Frank at the time, when we always say Frank Says Hi, who passed a little ways after this, we filmed like a trailer for a TV guy episode we were doing based on Lost, the first 3 seasons. And we filmed basically that scene where Jack and Kate and all that. But it's just that I will never forget that film. That is one of the best finales. There's a few in my book. There was a Smallville season that ended with a lot of characters looking like they died. And this one that I remember I was shook all summer long. That had me effed up, because I was like, and because I kept thinking that's the end point. That's where the rest of the show is going to lead to that point, which that would have been a real interesting way of doing it. Be like, what happened that made Jack, all he wants to do is come back to the island?
See, the only thing that I can think of that they created this Flash Sideways for was they kind of got caught with their pants down a couple of times at Comic-Con, where people were like, this is purgatory. And they were like, oh, fuck, they got us. Because they did use a lot of the storytelling elements from the original, like, Oz, not like the whole the whole anthology of Oz, not just the Wizard of Oz, but I mean they shot it like Henry Cavill and stuff like that. But they used that like time storyline, like the way they did it in that. And I think they were like, fuck it, we'll just pretend like that wasn't purgatory, and then we'll come up with this Flash Sideways to kind of backdoor it, like we weren't lying the whole time. That would be like hopefully that's what they did, because if this like Flash Sideways was their whole game plan the whole time. I mean, I haven't had time to think of my own way to do it. I usually like to book my own things if I'm going to criticize it, but it's just, you can't make it that convoluted. You just really can't.
I agree. I think the one thing that I would say about the whole purgatory, like the show was not purgatory. We both clearly say that. Christian Shepherd spills it. Anybody, like, I remember getting so mad when people were like, well, they were dead the whole time. Like, no, they weren't. He clearly stated in the episode they had a character telling.
Yes, he clearly stated it in the last episode, in the last scene. Yeah, that could have been just like a nice little, hey, just so you know, it wasn't. Even though it probably was, and we're just saving our ass.
Oh, no. See, I think they knew that the whole time, because every episode, some things were like what happened. You can't change the past. You can't change this. You can't change that. We knew that. But then at the end, they put the cherry on top of telling you, you know what? Everything that's real, everybody out there is real. Everything that happened to you is real. Some people died. Like, I think realistically, the moment Jack's eye closed and the death nail at the very last scene, when he dies with Vincent there, the emotions. That's when the LAX, that's when that scene when he's kind of opens his eyes on the plane. I think that's like how he kicked off into that other Flash Sideways, I don't know, purgatory Sideways. And all the other characters debut in when they eventually die. But I think it is, I just think there's so much good about this episode. Like the way Jin and Sun, they remember, they go back, except it is really, that also aggravates me, because when they died, like knowing they had a daughter, like Jin, no offense, obviously I wouldn't want my wife to die, but it's like, bro, I got a kid at home. Like the way they both died in that submarine, but also very emotional, had me crying. That episode had me bawling my eyes out. And then for them to remember, and then the scene, even when Juliet and Sawyer, when they remember, when Kate and Claire and Charlie, it's like those scenes, I don't care about how that ended. Those scenes alone are so good.
So you're like leaving out the fact that people did die. People did die in the episode, and that's when they went to the purgatory. But that is so hard to grasp in that time frame of what is happening. And then there's so many other things going on at the same time. The thing that I think we needed to see a little bit in the purgatory was the way that Jack was dead. Because Jack dies in that purgatory, in my opinion, this is just what I'm spitballing here from looking at it, when he's, like he's progressing to it. So he gets the stab in the neck from Locke in like the middle of that episode. And then in the middle of the episode in purgatory, it's kind of like piercing through his neck. So at that point, I connected the dot like, oh, this is happening to him at the same time.
Yeah, you're right. That was confusing, because also
if I got a little bit of that from everybody,
Yeah, well, because it's a centered around Jack. I think that's the whole thing. Is centered around Jack was like the theory behind the show.
But that's something I can grab onto as a person in the audience. Oh, he comes out of surgery with the hole in his neck right after we saw the scene of John Locke putting the thing into his neck. That to me is something like a piece that like is a part of a puzzle that's helping me connect the dots here, where they didn't do that for like, I'm watching, like I flipped on the finale because we're doing it, but I was watching the early parts of the season and I'm just sitting there and I've watched, the first 4 seasons of this show 100 times, 5th and 6th a few times, and I'm still years later just like, what is going on? And I watched a bunch of videos telling you what was going on. I think that's the thing.
Again, you're also watching fan videos. Like at the end of the day, we have to remember, like, this is another fan video. People are going to agree with some of the stuff we say, whether they watch it now, whether they watch it 2 years from now, whenever they watch this. And some people are going to be like, these guys are morons. It was very much clear. And it was very much just like, I think that's a thing. And some people, that's just how, people are always going to disagree. But I think that at the end of the day, the show, unfortunately, let me just say this. The fortunate and unfortunate part of the show was it was about the characters. It was about the emotion. It was about the connection. That was from the core of the show, and all the sci-fi, the mythology, the island background, everything else was all subplot. But the problem is, when that subplot became so relevant, you said this a little while ago, it was kind of like an onion. Jack's Locke character. This guy, he seems like, it must have been the man back at home. Instead, we found out he was a miserable bastard who, was in a wheelchair, and we find out he was in a wheelchair because his father stole his was a spleen or his kidney, and then he threw him out a window, and he's paralyzed. The only reason he was alive is because Jacob touched him. All these weird little things, but that all unraveled over 5 seasons. And then that you kept getting that for each character, and then it got to the point where some of those flashbacks were like, do we need to do that? Do we need more Jack? Like going back to the Jack tattoo. Do we need to know about Jack's tattoo? Could we just not give that to another character? Like the Nikki and Paulo episode we joked about. At least that was just totally funny, involving. You get and you got a little more of that loss. If we're in the 6th season, the whole pivot point, whenever you saw flashbacks or flash forwards, it all tied into why the character is the way they are when we see them on the island or we see them in live time. And this whole Flash Sideways didn't do that. It didn't add to that. It just made it more confusing. And I think to your point, that's what this was like. So if you're watching the 5th episode of the season, and then we're flashing to Saeed being in this afterlife scenario that we didn't know at the time, and you're like, well, what does that have to do with what Saeed being back from the dead for the 400th time on the island? Like, why is that?
So there was so much good drama in the finale on the island, which I think they've always done a good job with. They even did a good job with, I think, the flashbacks were phenomenal. The flash forward was pretty good. But then the Flash Sideways, I would have cared way more about that last season if they stayed mainly on the island. Like the fact they Hurley, Sawyer, they were legit 4, 8, 6, 12, 8, 15, 16, 23, 42. They were everybody had a number. And then the finalists that were chosen out of those numbers were 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, 42. Like, to me, that is the shit that I want time spent on. That's the stuff I've invested in, not some bullshit fake stuff that's pissing me off because why the hell is Jack married to Juliet? It's just
why do they have a son that didn't matter?
Yeah. He's just not there. Like, Jack spent it seemed like he had a lot of mental energy invested in that purgatory, and they're just like, oh, I don't have a son. I don't care anymore. It's like, what is that?
What you just said. That's the part that I think people forever, eternally will be frustrated by, because it's just dumb. It's poor storytelling, to go to what you said earlier. But to give them credit, those scenes, again, in this finale where Jack fought so hard not to remember. He had several opportunities. Him and Kate, by the way, Kate looking like a bombshell in that black dress. But that specifically was woof. But anyways, she, going up to Jack and be like, I've missed you. And she touched him, and he sees it a little bit, and he's like, no, get this out of here. I think I know where this is going, but I don't want to be a part of it. And then eventually gets to the point where he's in the church, and he touches the casket, and he fights it, and he fights where every other character didn't fight it. Every other character allowed themselves to remember, to be at peace with everything. And it was just, that was the one thing that was interesting about it. But again, this could have been told in so many different ways. And the one thing I think, I don't know if I read or if I'm making this up or if I'm crying to remember, that somewhere 5-6 years ago, I read some fan theory. And the one thing that I think they really could have done, and I think would have satisfied the audience with the Flash Sideways, if you take the Flash Sideways out, maybe and place it somewhere towards the end of the year, but everything from a Flash standpoint was more from the Jacob standpoint. So Jacob's been there for hundreds of years. So we could have maybe done some pivot points to show like the origins of this, where we saw a lot of stuff. Like I think Lost answered so many more questions than people give.
I don't care about the answering of questions. I really don't.
That's a big thing. They answered so much more. They just didn't tell you, here's the answer to that question. Like the Black Rock, we found out that was Richard Alpert coming over on a slave boat. And guess what the Black Rock hit? It hit the statue, which broke the statue down to being a 4-toed statue. That statue was up there because it had a history, a mythology of these ancient people that were on this island when it was created or somewhere in the early points. And I think that's the difficult part. You have to accept the answers they gave you instead of being upset with every single one. Like for me, the hangups I always had was, what was the deal with Walt? Like they never really gave us why he was special. I always thought the end game, and
they just had to write him off because he was getting old.
He was he was like what, 10 years old. Yeah. But you know what? I wouldn't have cared if he was on there and he grew immensely over the years.
Nobody would.
But like you could have just made, because he's special. He grows fat. They did that when Michael found him again in the huts. I think that's what people forget too, how special that feeling the show was. Like every time, like that episode when Michael's sitting in the hatch, he's just typing in the numbers and then gets the incoming message and you find out it's Walt or somebody playing Walt. That was awesome stuff. I just think I always thought the end game of this show was either going to involve Desmond saving them, like it never happened, or Walt, Aaron, some of the other kids, Sun and Jin's child, was going to do something. They were going to be especially involved because all those kids had a role on the island in some way. Like Sun got pregnant on the island. Claire gave birth on the island. Those are two things that we were told could not happen. We don't really know why either. That was a whole nother thing. But I always thought that was going to have a big tie-in, and it didn't.
Well, I mean, it's just so ridiculous. Like, I forget my point that I was going to make, but like you sidetracked me with the children thing.
Sorry.
The wall thing was 100% just like they hired a teenage like black kid and they were like, all right, ship him out.
He's 10 years old.
Yeah. Mac, I'm furious why they didn't answer anything about Walt. That was one of the craziest things. They literally just ship him out on a boat and it's like, follow this compass marking and he's gone. Then Michael comes back for a little bit to save the day. Totally
to die.
Yeah.
He comes back to die because he couldn't die off the island, which also was a very confusing thing. But this is why I think people are frustrated because, okay, so Michael's character to send him off needed to come back to the island and blow up that ship that should have killed Jin, didn't kill Jin, whatever. And you heard all those Widmore people. And that's another thing. Widmore is another like key, like he was part of the big chess game that we thought, but really didn't end up meaning much. He died just, he died. He's dead. Like, okay, like it's just so strange the way particular characters, the way their arc ended off where island with Locke. And that, remember when like Locke was in a wheelchair and he saw him going to school and he was just like, you have to, like, he's like, how's my dad doing? It was like not even an important scene. It was just strange little things that I think really bother people. But I don't think the creators were looking at it. They were like, yeah, we'll tie him into this and then we'll move on. Where other people are like, no, we need a complete ending. We need to know what happened, why he was that way.
Yeah, I mean, and it is hard to put a bow on anything this big, especially a 5-season expansive thing. I think Breaking Bad was this was 6. Breaking Bad was 5.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't want to compare apples to oranges here because they're not the same thing, right?
No.
This was a legit.
By the way, Superman punch is about to happen behind you.
Yes, here it comes. Right,
the greatest. Look at that!
If you're watching, it really is a Superman punch.
And then look when he lands, though. He's in like a tackle.
And I always hate when they come back from break and show me the thing that just happened. Like I'm waiting on the edge of my seat here. I know he's in the air. You can just cut right to him jumping. Yeah. But there's just a thing about some finality to a finale, and I think Game of Thrones also big swing and a miss on their finale. It's just when a show does not follow the format or the storytelling or really like the same notes it's been hitting all along in their finale. I hate that. I hate when the finale is a completely different animal than the rest of the show. And that's what this one felt like to me. And that's what kind of season 6 felt like on a whole for me. These characters weren't the same characters. And it wasn't because they were changed. It was because the writing and the storytelling was completely different.
No, yeah, I have to agree with you. I still think, I think a future podcast stream will be, I have a belief that in the general public, there are very few shows that leave you with a good taste in your mouth. And none of the shows you just mentioned did. Like the last thing you saw from the show, I still think Breaking Bad as a show with the finale left everybody like satisfied. Then they brought out this ridiculous movie. So that's technically the last thing that you're seeing in the canon, unless Better Call Saul, goes into the future.
Like, but amazing ending.
Well, that's fine. And I've never seen it.
And the movies are good too.
I'll give you all the credit with that, but I still believe there are very few shows that people say, I am so content. That was so well done. Like obviously Seinfeld.
It's so hard to say goodbye to anything. I think that's the whole thing. Exactly. You don't want it to end. You don't want, relationships, TV shows, movies. It's tough to finish a good book. You just don't want it to end. And typically the best endings leave you from a storytelling standpoint with a bad taste. Like the story doesn't have a happy ending. That to me is usually the sign, a hallmark, and that's why I love this show. I love Game of Thrones, is because typically it was like, life does suck. It is hard to swallow. It's a tough ending. No, I'm dead serious. Like my favorite,
man, life sucks, and then
my favorite books don't have fucking happy endings because it's more real. That it's more raw. It's more emotion. Like some things do have a nice happy ending, and it's fine. But I like a good solid like, whew. Man, that was hot. Like that like left me. It was impactful.
Like happy, but I know what you're saying. Like, would you say like Avengers Endgame left you like it had a happy ending but a sad ending?
Yeah, it killed off the spoiler alert, guys. It killed off Tony Stark. I thought you could have done a little bit more damage to people in the universe, but I get it from like a production standpoint. That's like a huge mega money like making thing. But like, what were the stakes? What were the stakes of Lost? Like when you put them in purgatory and then they all go off to happily ever after. What did that show mean? I would have preferred it if there was no flash sideways and fucking Jack dies on the island, Hurley's left alone, and like they finish out everybody's stories. Maybe like kind of like Avengers Endgame. Like a few people have a happy ending, but like Hurley's now with fucking Ben forever on the island until somebody else comes and takes the mantle. And I thought that was the coolest part. Is that Jacob was bringing these people to be the next one to defend the island, to take on the Man in Black, because he knew that was his part of the end game. And I would have even liked if they somehow spun off one of those characters, like the Black Smoke didn't kind of go away, and you have that cliffhanger ending of there's like another guy out there that could be the next Man in Black, because they just literally defeated all the evil in the world when he went away from that standpoint, right? I mean, that was the devil and Jacob was God.
Well, in this particular, yes. Overall, I think honestly that would have been awful if there was some sort of mysterious other person out of the black, or unless we tied into a character, whether it be A or
that's what I mean.
Or be like that would have been a little interesting if it was like, well, I just think like even like that, like where the smoke monster came from, there was an answer to that. I just particularly didn't like it. I just didn't like that answer.
I didn't mind it. I mean, he was the smoke monster, and that's how he like. I didn't. At least that was like a legitimate thing. I was like, all right, that makes a little bit of sense. But I mean, I threw the smoke monster being somebody as just like a caveat thing. But my other point, I think, was that, and I really want to hammer that home, is don't do the flash sideways and have everybody end their thing on the island. I think them walking off into some magic is shitty. Uh-oh.
Sorry.
I think them all walking off into some magical sunset is weird. I don't enjoy that part of the storytelling. I liked it when Jack died. If you edit out the finale to just the parts on the island, I think that would have been more the whole season actually, because all the drama that's going on, Sawyer wanting to kill Jack because he killed what's her name?
He blamed Jack for the death of Juliet.
Yes, I don't know why I always don't want to say Juliet, but I know it's Juliet. He blamed her for that, and that to me is just better storytelling. Like if Sawyer is the guy who's left holding the bag, the only one with it, has a shitty ending on the island, I'm cool with that. That's the kind of storytelling that feels more real than this fairy tale ending where it's literally they're all walking into fucking heaven. That's
see, I don't know. I liked it. I like maybe the fuzzy happy ending, especially watching these characters struggle for so long that they didn't have that. Like Jack, no offense, Jack had a miserable ending. The guy held on to this guy had so much success on the island, but all of his failures outweighed anything he did good, especially what you're talking about there. When they put the bomb off, he's like, this is all going to reset. We're all going to be fine. To find out, nope, Juliet's dead. And Sawyer wants to kill him. And he's like, no, this wasn't supposed to happen, but not realizing. Well, that's the other thing that's weird. Because as a storytelling, in the season premiere, it was made to us believe like, oh, well, guess what? This bomb going off made some sort of happy side place. But that had nothing, those two didn't correlate.
No, it did. It worked.
Yeah, but what worked?
The idea that the plane never like landed, like that was them getting to purgatory. That was them setting up the place that they could all meet and be together.
Sure, but I don't think that was it.
At least I think. I don't know. I'll need to sit down and talk to fucking David and fucking Carlton and figure it out. Like,
but that's the thing. I think honestly, and I think if we were to ever sit down with them, they'd say, "Well, what do you think?" And they'd say, "Well, then that's it." Because I think that's one thing also that's good about.
That's fine. I'm totally cool with that. And I think the ending of The Sopranos, totally cool with that. I'm not there yet, but I know what it is. I'm totally cool with that shit. You know what the ending is.
Yeah, of course I do. It's one of the most famous endings. Another one that highly disappointed in a lot of people's eyes. But you got, because I think people want some form of resolve. I think Lost did a great job with their characters. I think each character got a nice send-off. I think that's what's really important too. This was not a show that led you to believe that, like, you were going to get something either really miserable or super happy. I think every character got a nice little send-off in that final scene. You got to see some old familiar faces. It was emotional. Like, we hadn't seen Boone. Like, that's cool. Cool, Boone's there again. And some of that, I just think it was a little disappointing. And this has nothing to do with the creators or anything. It's just who was available, who wasn't, who they wanted. Like, not having the Michaels, the Waltz, the Echoes, and some of those other, even Ana Lucia, some of these other characters that were there would have just been a nice final tie. And I know they probably attempted everything they could to get them there.
It's also very flimsy and cheap to have, like, Purgatory, if it's a real place in this Flash Sideways, which we're led to believe that that's the Purgatory.
Yep.
That they're being, they have to come to grips with who they were and, like, the sins that they committed, and now they have to be okay with it. So it makes no sense for Sawyer to be a cop. It makes, no sense for Jack to really be avoiding everything. And then, 10 seconds before the whole thing ends, he talks to his dad and he's like, all right, I'm cool. I just think that was just such an easy fix. Like, it's just like, how do we do this? Oh, we're writing it in real quick. I think I'm going to edit the whole season 6 without the Flash Sideways and see how people like it.
I'm down.
if I ever had the time.
All right, before we wrap up, so let's look at it. So when it first aired, you felt
terrible. I didn't like it.
Did you ever get to the point where you were satisfied?
When I watched it back, probably like a year or two later, like I watched the whole thing. And since then, I probably watched it a few times through. I was like, okay, I get it. With the help of YouTube videos and people telling me what it was, I was like, sure, I buy it. It's cool. Whatever. Whatevs. I invested so much time, but I like 1 through 3 and I'll watch those till the day I die.
Yeah, for me, when it first aired, loved it, thought it was fantastic, was emotional, was crying, literally crying, had no shame. And then I watched the Jimmy Kimmel special where everybody, it was so funny to see the actor who plays Widmore basically be like, I don't even know if I was a good guy or a bad guy. It was great. I don't know if that's on YouTube, but watch the Jimmy Kimmel after the finale. Fantastic. Then, a couple years went by and I started to really get PO'd by it because I started to think to myself, what happened to all these other mysteries? Like, what about Walt? What about this? I found the numbers to be kind of a cop-out. I felt that, and so I started doing that thing where I got emotional about it and started feeling they didn't do something for me. Then I was like, okay. Then I put Lost away for a while, got lost with a lot of different other shows, wrestling and everything else I get, tied in with. And then when I watched it again the past few times, I literally got all those emotions back. I felt all the feelings. Yeah, could it have been better? Of course. You could say that about everything. But I still feel like they hit all the core emotions of putting these characters, finding their place, finding their footing, finding their happiness, because they weren't there when this whole show started. And I thought just the ending scene, beautiful with Jack closing his eye, Vincent being there. Also, it's technically, that's the very last thing you say.
No, on the actual ABC finale, that
bullcrap with the freaking plane shit. Is that what you're going to talk about?
Why? Why would you do that to us? And they said that it was just a palate cleanser before the news. Before the news. That's such a. How am I supposed to know that? How the fuck am I supposed to know that? That left me being like, did any of this happen? It's a fucking empty plane with just fucking pieces everywhere.
I took it as.
Why would you do that? Why, as the creators, wouldn't you be like, what the fuck? No.
They had no say. They had no say in that part.
I don't care if they didn't have it. I would come out publicly 10 seconds later and be like, hey, hello. But like, it's not on national TV. I didn't know that for a while. I was like, what was that? As a fan, I was sitting there like, did this not happen? Like, what was that?
To me, it was just like watching the scenery of it. But I do understand, because also the part that I think
give me a pan out. Fucking, I don't give a shit. Give me a pan out of the island.
what I agree with you on is because there was noise. If there was no sound, it was just like wind whistling below slowly in the background and seeing all the plane crash. And I like that scene because I just was like, look at where we've come from. Like, this is what we first saw, this insanity. And now, and like, look at how it just ended. Wow, beautiful. And then, but I didn't realize all these fans. I remember going on the message boards after that Jimmy Kimmel. Everyone's like, they were dead the whole time. The plane crashed. Nobody, like, there was nobody alive. Did you see that? And I'm like, oh crap, I didn't even think of that. And then, the creators came out the next day and were like, that was BC, not us.
I gotta create a Venn diagram where you're in the middle of it, and it's things everybody dislikes, Rossi doesn't like, things people hate, Rossi likes. And I think it would be hilarious to see like Avengers Endgame lost finale. Like that is like just so you to do that. Like,
but this is not like me to do that. That is just literally how the Seinfeld finale was the most famous episode. It's one of the most famous episodes. It's a draft of 40 episodes. You're gonna pick it. No,
you wouldn't. I wouldn't come. That would literally be in like probably the bottom. Would be in the bottom 20.
If I die tomorrow, and that's my legacy, I'm cool with that. But I remember when that lost stuff happened, I was just like, I'll never forget how jarred I was. Like, people think that wasn't part of the show. At least I didn't even,
How did you know?
Because it was credits. It was, because we saw the lost, they did the lost, like, sign off. They showed the lost. That's just in my mind. I was like, they showed the lost sign off. We're done. Hands are clean. Whatever we see after this doesn't matter. Because I wasn't expecting.
No one thought that. No one in the world. The producers literally had to come out and say that wasn't part of the show.
I am just so smart.
I
have to remember that. But I think, like I said, I think the show itself, I still believe it to be the most creative show of all time. To go 6 seasons, regardless of your frustrations or this, every show that we watch now comes from a comic book, comes from some previous writing, comes from a previous movie. Not all shows.
I mean, this is like, I totally agree. This is creative, but this borrowed from literally like there was like a lot of this is just other things all Frankenstein into one thing, which I do prepare for. And I'm going to tell you right now, I work at a company like it does what I've said my whole life. And I work at a company that believes it doesn't matter who did it first. It's who does it better. Absolutely. And they did a lot of stuff like that, where they borrowed from other genres, other timelines, other ideas. And they really did something. I think that makes you creative, because at this point, all the stories have been run.
It wasn't like they took direct, like,
no.
This story, I'm going to take it. It's not like an American Horror Story type where they actually take an archetype, and not disrespect to that show, but I think that's what makes this show special. Like, people that think Game of Thrones is one of the greatest shows, it was a book, and that's no disrespect. Great, they did an awesome job and made it spectacular looking. But I look at that and I'm like, even Westworld, that was a movie. There's books, there's series.
Yeah, I mean, everything comes from a certain source material, and this was a creation from. Like, this is how you do it.
There's just guys like us sitting in a room and like creating. And I think that's the one last thing I want to say that I think people have to realize, where the frustration, when you have a show like this and you keep expanding your writers, your creators, your directors, there's too much. You have to keep the core. And that's what I liked about Damon Lindelof and Carlton Cuse. They were the constant throughout the series, but they even said at times they just handed the project over because they were working on different things. Like, Carlton Cuse started creating and writing Bates Motel in like season 5, and Damon Lindelof had Prometheus as a movie he was working on,
which was fucking terrible.
I never saw it. That's the Alien movie, right? About aliens.
Yeah, it was awful. I saw it on an opening night. It was one of the biggest disappointments in my entire life. It was awful.
Aliens don't scare me. I'm not scared of aliens. Don't do it for me. The movie never did it.
Mac brings up a good point here in the comments. The show did an unbelievable job evoking emotions for every character. And yes, through the looking glass, Charlie's death scene, I mean, that is storytelling at its best. He's sacrificing for the whole, like, everyone, just to show, like, it was just such an emotional thing. And before that, he had been, like, cast away because they thought he was back on the smack. And, like, it was just a great job of storytelling. The Mr. Echo one, that one always hits me in the heartstrings. Pretty much every Locke episode. I hated
that. Was pissed me off. I don't know why.
The death, but like his episode where you find out that he was actually the drug runner and his brother was like the actual like hero and real priest, and you find out he's like a vicious fucking warlord. That's fucking insanity. I hated Son and Jin at first, and you got mad at me for that. But Jin wound up being one of my favorite characters ever. Their story's super emotional.
And Hyper Billy is on a roll.
No, he really, like, I mean, like, If you go down the history, I will say John Locke, hands down, my favorite dramatic character. And Jin, it's one of those things. They say that friendship hits different when you don't like each other at first. I mean, I think a character that you don't like at first and you learn to like, it's a little bit more special to you. He is so fucking great. Others. Like,
he's great. No, I agree with you there. And how he learns English throughout the show. That's also just a very small, awesome arc about the show, that this man couldn't speak English and then speaks perfect English at the end. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
He does all time traveling.
His wife helps him a little bit.
Also, Sun, underratedly sexy.
Oh yeah, she's hot.
She has some real knockout scenes. Yeah. So I think, Lost to Us, for me, it's my all-time favorite show. There's not a show that compared to it. I love a lot of shows. I've had a lot of fun with television shows and box sets and rewatching, but there's no show that gripped me like this, that was an event I could not miss. Like, there have been shows that I said, if I miss it this week, I'll watch it tomorrow. Like,
I know.
Lost was a show I could not miss. By the time I would watch some shows now, like on DVR, I'd already would watch it like 3-4 times. It is just that damn good to me and that damn gripping. And it's just something that, for me, will no other show will ever compare. And there were so many shows that tried. Oh, the Kate
black dress
scene. Oh my god.
So I mean we could do best Kate moments, best outfit she's had, like when she dives in the water. Oh, she's just smoking hot. She is an idiot, though. She is one of those people who's like, I'm not going to wear a mask. Nothing's going to stop me from being free. But I actually, doing this podcast, I know I wanted to do a characters and episodes, which I would love to do too. But I think best lost moments.
Yeah, I thought about
also be a good one, because there are so many standout moments. And to your point, this is probably a top 3 show of all time. It's definitely my favorite drama of all time, 100%. I'm a comedy guy through and through. Psych. I think I just have to be that guy now. And it is my favorite show. I watch probably 15 episodes a week. But, and that's literally not a joke. But this show, the first 3 seasons, I don't think television gets better. I really don't. And that's why it's so frustrating to talk about this finale. And when I was watching it, I'm literally getting angry, because I've grown to know these characters for a long time and invested a lot in it. And it just was like, man, it just irked me, the ending.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think that's the hardest part, because they set such a high standard and it never reached that, it never went there again. It's just, like we said, there was so many onion peeling moments where you're like learning more about a character, and then eventually you're like, oh, that's how it ends. I get that. One other frustration point, and I just want to bring this up because of the church. I know I brought this up to you once before. How the hell did they let the whole scene when they killed Mr. Echo off because he didn't want to be on the show anymore? He didn't want to live in Hawaii. He wanted to go for other projects. He was building a church on the island. That was his thing. He was telling Charlie, I'm building a church. They could have easily tied that all in, where he knew of this afterlife, or he somewhatly, even subconsciously knew that was the church he was building. That would have been an amazing tie-in, where he was like, I'm building this church here on this island before we start flipping around time, and it's for something. It's for something big. Because he had that kind of Desmond-ish characteristic to him, because he was I kind of knew a little bit more, but didn't really. He just had a belief and a faith. And
didn't he punk the smoke monster at one time?
Well,
before it killed him?
I don't know if he punked it, but the smoke monster came and inherently read his mind, because that was another one of the famous stills that he was showing flashes of his previous life, showing his brother. His brother and him had a conversation that was the smoke monster. He was one of them. He was the first character. Him and Locke were the two tied in with the smoke monster previous to the big reveal. Which
is great, and it does wind up paying off. And I think they say it either in the finale or early on. The reason that the Man in Black, the Man in Black, the devil, chose Locke is because he was the only one who wanted to be on the island. He was the only one who understood why being on the island was a good thing, and the contradiction of him being the guy that wanted to be on the island, and all the Man in Black has ever wanted to do getting off the island.
Yeah, it's true. It was good. The show was great. I think you have a great idea. I think best moments, not even a top 11, just literally because there's so many things that we could both ping off that. I think that's something we come back to. Lost, again, at the end, like I said, it's my favorite show of all time, your favorite drama. I think for people that never have seen it, it's hard. I don't think you could ever watch it after original airing, like my wife did, former roommates of mine did, but after it was over, and it's just not the same because there was something, especially at this time, of watching it week to week or having that separation after seasons and reading and complementing theories or putting theories into play.
That was my first venture into message boards. Was my first venture into true geekdom. I joined the ABC panels and got kicked off for what they thought was a very inappropriate comment. So, but it wasn't. But
I wrote a script on there once.
Did you really?
Yeah. So I'll briefly tell you,
like a fandom, like a fanfic.
Oh, totally fan. So I forget where we were in the show, but I remember it's when I worked at the place where we had our first banquet when I worked in Cambridge at that building. And I remember I was there like 5 a.m. all the time. So I was watching that video site prior to YouTube for all you out there. If anybody remembers thatvideosite.com. Anyway, so I wrote a plot that it was called The Intern. The name of it was going to be a finale. And the long story short of it was basically it was somebody watching from homeland. It was the first time we'd see anything off island. And it was somebody watching from like a Dharma Initiative perspective. And their name was something Locke. Like I remember writing this whole thing where he or she was like watching everybody and seeing all these things on the island. And then like somebody comes in and goes, all right, Mr. Locke, like you're free to go. And it was like somebody else coming in to watch them. And I thought this was like this revolutionary idea. I remember getting all these compliments like, oh man, that would be awesome. And it ended up being somewhatly kind of what happened, but it was more from Penny's perspective, where Penny hired those guys to watch the island, for the magnetism. Is that the word? Anyways, but it's just so crazy because that's the thing about the show. You link back about that, like Penny was following this. How did she know what to look for? Like, how did her father know how to get back?
I mean, how did the Dharma Initiative know that study the electromagnetivity or whatever the hell it was of the island? Magnetism. It was just one of those things you kind of gotta accept.
Well, at least and like who was the DeGroot? I always thought that was going to be another big thing. The DeGroots and Alvar Hanso. I always thought those were going to be like these major plot points later in the show. Never to be seen.
I think that was all lost experience stuff. But I do disagree with you a little bit. I think you can get a very big enjoyment from rewatching. I disagree with you. Shocking, I know. You can get a very. I've watched it with people who were watching it for the first time, like as like a lost virgin years later, and I think it does give you a certain amount of enjoyment. I mean, this was my first binge, and it was the most ridiculous binge I'd ever done. I watched the first season
in one day,
nonstop. I didn't even stop. There was nothing. Like I watched every episode from start to finish in my bedroom, lights out, and I don't know, like add up the time. It was legit straight, and I think it was like 20 episodes.
It was 24 episodes it might have been. I remember this because we were playing stickball at the time, and I was calling you. I'd say, Bill, you're going to come play stickball. You're like, no, I still got like 5 episodes left. I'm like, oh, just take a break. And you're like, no, I'm just going to finish this thing through. And I think those are the things about a show like Lost, and so many shows are like this. You have those memories of your first experience. For me, I didn't watch the first season live. It was on the same time as Smallville, one of my favorite shows. And I remember watching it once the summer came and they re-aired the show. But I still think there was a different experience. I think people that watched it on a binge would be less disappointed. That's, I think, my major point to if you binge watch Lost. So
it was 25 episodes, say 42 minutes per episode. I watched legitimately with bathroom breaks 18 straight hours because it was 17.5 at 17 and a half hours if you add all the episode times up. I mean, some of them probably 41, 42, 43 on an average. You say 42, 17 and a half hours. I watched it in 18 hours.
Pretty impressive.
I mean,
how good the show, the impact, because we
don't know how high I can fly.
Oh, please, Bill, when you want to do something, you can do it. But that's the thing that makes me laugh about it, because I remember myself, Frank, and a couple people talking about it, and you'd be like, what's this show all about? What's this? What's that? And I don't know if I gave you DVDs.
No, I was at Blake's house, and you guys were watching like the end of Lockdown, which is my favorite episode. And I just saw the ending, and I was like, holy shit. All right, I'll do it.
No, I don't believe you.
That was it. That was it.
I don't think you came in that late. No, because that was season 3.
No, that was season 2.
Lockdown's later.
Lockdown is season 2, episode 18.
You're right. You're right. I'm sorry, because that was the Hatch. You're right. Hatch was gone after that.
Yep. And then I remember once season 2 happened, we didn't have the DVDs, but you had them all on tape. So I would go over to Blake's house and watch it with you guys until I caught up right at the beginning. I think I caught up in between season 2. I don't even think season 2 was off the air yet.
No, I agree. I think so, because I know for a fact it was definitely towards the end, because it was like spring when you binged the whole thing. Oh man, you're right. A Lockdown, because I remember watching the episode several several times and pausing a million times.
Mhm.
Like, my God, that shows also how old this show is. I have all those on
VHS.
Oh
Absolutely.
my God! And I used to rip the you can't record
the tabs.
tab.
You just put a piece of tape right over that, and that fixes that.
I plucked that thing right off. Flick it in the trash.
No, if you put a piece of tape over that thing, like I used to have to do that to my dad's stuff, to tape over his old sports games because he pulled the tab too.
Okay, if you pull the tab, no more recording. But anyways, Lost, awesome show. Definitely, I can understand people being on both sides at the end of the day with the finale. I totally get the disappointment. I totally understand people that are satisfied. I fit probably more towards the satisfied in retrospect, as this is all about 10 years later. It is crazy to think that was 10 years ago. I'm sorry. That really blew my mind.
It feels like this is weird, but it feels like it's been a really long time. And it also feels like it hasn't been a really long time, if that makes sense.
It's Lost. Time doesn't matter, Bill.
No, but I feel like if you told me it was like 20 years ago or 5 years ago, I'd be like, all right. Like, you could tell me it was 5 years ago or 15, and I'd be like, that makes sense. Feels about right.
It's really funny to say that because, like, when you think of things that happened, like, on that year or whatever, like, songs or movies that were, you'd be like, that was so long ago. But then with this one, you're like, oh, that's not too bad. It's like no, that's crazy. Like, to think, like, I don't know, like, I think of, like, obviously I watch a ton of wrestling, but like, what the heck, like, some things I watch in wrestling that happened like 10 years ago, like, that seems like a lifetime ago. Or you'd be like, oh, that was right around the corner. And this show to me definitely feels like it could have been like either, like you said, like 20 years ago seems a little bit
15.
far, but like 15, like, I believe you. I don't know. It's crazy. It just feels like, I don't know. It just, when I watched it again, it felt like it was yesterday in some ways, but then also, it's just also weird because a lot of these people haven't done a lot, like, as actors. So I think that actually kind of helps it too. It's not like you're like, oh, you think of them as so many other things, except from The Wasp. Like, that's the biggest thing I think that came out of this whole show for characters.
Oh, yeah. Evangeline Lilly. Like, what's his name? I think he was kind of a jerk, so he doesn't get any more work. Matthew Fox.
Well, Matthew Fox says he didn't want to do TV anymore. So he was in, like, We Are Marshall, and he's been in a couple other movies, but nothing, like, major.
A guy Lapidus behind me right now.
But that's what before we really end this, one of the best things, and I appreciate everyone that watches. We didn't even say hit subscribe, please. Goes a lot.
We just got right into it, and we went for an hour and 10 minutes,
which is the norm, especially with Lost. I could go another 2 hours, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I would say the one thing you have to go watch, and I should have said this early, is you have to watch How It Should Have Ended, which the whole YouTube series, funny, they make cartoons of Lost. It's like 2 minutes long, but it has one of the greatest songs in there.
Oh, Lapidus song.
The Lapidus song, it's like he just shows up. It's like the scene when they're in the sub, and he's like, I think I could be of assistance. Like, Lapidus, he survives explosions because he's the only pilot. Lapidus, the best line. Sorry, I get a kick out of this. It's like, the mysteries don't matter. Does that even bother you? Lapidus. Walter Whitmore used to be important. Lapidus. It's fantastic stuff by those guys, and they made that like 2 months after the finale. It was made over 10 years ago if you look on YouTube. So please go watch that. My little singing did no justice to it. But that is great. Like Billy said, a lot of stuff on the internet when it comes to Lost. This is now part of the junk of the internet. Appreciate you guys checking us out. You can check out our podcast at Pop Culture Piledriver, wherever you get your podcast. You can check us out on Twitter at Pop Culture PD. Give us a follow. Send us a tweet. Let us know your thoughts. Send us a DM. Slide into at Billy D 2411's DMs. As soon as those masks are coming off, so are the clothes. And you can follow me at Jason D Rossi. Bill, any final words for anybody out there loving Lost, hating Lost, feeling lost?
Yeah, if you're feeling lost, you can always slide into my DMs for whatever you may need, a friendly ear or anything else. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I'm actually not. But no, it's going to hold a special place in my heart forever. And I look forward to future podcasts about Lost. Maybe we could make it, a biannual thing, or maybe even like a quarter annually. I don't know what that's called. A 4 times a year thing, because there's a lot you can dig into. I think this is the show that we share the most in common with, probably. We've seen it hundreds of times each. At least certain episodes I've seen, upwards of 30, 40 times. So really, if you've never seen it, I don't know why you're still listening, but if you haven't rewatched it in a while, it is worth it, especially, again, I can't harp on how good the first 3 seasons were.
Yeah, and it's on Hulu for those that have Hulu. DVDs are cheap if you're into that. If you even have a DVD player anymore, which I realized I don't have in half of my rooms.
Oh, PS4, baby.
I have a PS4. I have I have an Xbox, but I don't have it was funny. I was thinking about this, like in my bedroom, which you can see. This is my awesome big TV. Look at that puppy.
Oh my God, like fucking Michael Scott.
Hey, listen, not that big of a room. Anyways, I started realizing that I only can stream on everything, which, first of all, it's 2020. Of course, that's what we have smart TVs for. But I lost. It is weird, though, because I think there are, like you said, with Scrubs, I think I've noticed a couple little discrepancies with some of the episodes, that things have been like taken out or edited just a little bit. Hulu has a weird functionality to them about that, and I don't quite understand it. And I've read a lot of different theories on why, or editing purposes or whatever. But anywho, Lost, definitely watch it. Give it a try. Maybe come back, watch this video. Let us know your thoughts. Leave comments. Be like, these guys are morons. Love this guy's idea. Obviously mine, Billy's was horrible. Feel free to let us know anything else. And I think, like Billy said, there's a lot of meat on the bone of Lost. We could definitely get into more. There's best moments. There's best characters. There's best episodes. And we could do that with a lot of shows. So we'll definitely get into it as time goes on and kind of progresses. We kind of find our footing here with Pop Culture Piledriver. And that's the best part.
Uh-oh.
No. We're not shy. We'll talk about anything. So, aside from that, enjoy Lost. We'll see you in another life, brother. Frank says hi.